So welcome everybody. We're going to get started. So 5 years ago, our board at Uspire had an away day. And during that away day, we spent a lot with 2 days, actually 2 full days. And we did some work, as you do as a board, as a leadership team. I'm sure you've all done that as well. And we did some work around our values and our vision and what we were all about, what our brand essence was. And we came up with a vision for our business called, which we chose to call Uspire at that point. Actually, it was called something different before then. And we came up with a vision of the finest commercial leaders in the world. And we thought, whoa, wouldn't that be absolutely amazing if Uspire was in touch with and was able to support and influence and empower the finest leaders in the world. So as we chose what to do over the next 5 years, we had to, as you can imagine, work out how we're going to get hold of them. How are we going to know them even? Because there'll be thousands, if not millions, of commercial leaders who we don't know. And there were a few things that we did. One of them was to decide about 2 years ago that we were going to do things like this so that we could meet the finest commercial leaders in the world and introduce ourselves to them, and so that they could come into our network as well. And one of the other things that we did, I'm just going to share my screen here to show you actually. So one of the other things that we did was, that for some reason is not working. Yes, it is. Here we are. There we go. Got ya. One of the other things that we did is we created a Uspire network, which is specifically for the finest commercial leaders that we can find. And we have a combination of award-winning speakers, of coaching and mentoring, commercial coaching and mentoring, and then also the peer-to-peer think tank, where leaders are able to come together to talk about the things that really are influencing them now and that are impacting them and often challenging them. And today is one of those days when we're going to do that. So we have an award-winning speaker who I'll tell you about in 2 seconds time. We also are going to be sharing some thoughts. So we're going to encourage you to use the chat, to add your questions in as we go through, and to pipe up when asked to by Kate. Please put your videos on if you haven't already, so we can get a look at the finest commercial leaders. And yeah, so today is allowing you to kind of spend some time together thinking about a topic which we think is, when we planned it, we thought it was going to be really resonant right now, and whoa, is it resonant? So today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Kate Turner. Give us a wave, Kate. The topic of motivation, I've been working with Kate now for 10 years, and Kate is part of our leadership community and our key partner in motivation. She's written a book, which, Kate, don't forget to tell them about the book. And when I first heard about motivation in this context with Kate's Motivational Maps and Kate's approach to motivation, it was a game changer for me. It was an absolute game changer, because I'd been brought up in the 80s and 90s around my job as a leader is to motivate my team. So you've got to go for it, rah, rah, motivate. And the work that I did with Kate 10 years ago, and the work that we now do with our clients, somebody just dropped themselves onto mute. I think we've got a bit of interference. Thank you. The work that we now do with Kate is so different, because the work that we do with Kate now is all around the fact that actually I can motivate myself. And somebody, can I just stop for 1 second?
It's Chris's iPhone.
Okay, Chris's iPhone, if you could mute for me, please. Kate, could you mute? Can you mute that microphone? Thank you very much. That's marvellous. So yeah, the work that we now do with motivation, and the work that Kate's going to talk you through, shows you that you do not need to motivate everybody. What you do need to do is understand what motivates them. So I'm going to pass over to Kate now to discover the power of motivation. Over to you, Kate.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And just an absolute delight to be here. You're right. It is a subject that is particularly useful at this time of year when we've got so many people telling us what we should be doing around setting goals and what have you. So really important to focus on this now. As we've just been introduced with Amanda, my name's Kate Turner. I'm the founding director of Motivational Leadership, and I mentioned that simply to give you a clue as to kind of where I come from. For me, you can't have motivation without leadership and leadership without motivation. Those two are really very much entwined. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is it's not rah-rah stuff. You know, I mean, I for sure came across motivation stuff years ago, and it was about walking on hot coals. It's about, I've been on the high ropes courses. I'm quite proud of actually how well I did on my high ropes courses because I don't like heights. But it's not about that. That's not what I do. What I do is I help individuals understand how to access their sustainable motivation. And I don't do it just to make them feel good. I mean, that's nice, but that's not just the reason that I do it. It links into something more broadly, and I'm sure it's going to link into something that really matters to you. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. So what is motivation, why it matters, how it links into something really important, and how can you harness and create motivation? I believe you can create motivation. So many of us leave it to happenstance. So if you are feeling like that might be a good use of the next hour or so, then please let's get using that chat right from the word go, and just put a big yay or Y, as in the letter Y for yes, in the chat. We need to get you using chat. So is talking about motivation, harnessing it, creating it, something that's good for you? Please put a yes or a yay or something or other. There we go. Thank you. Otherwise, I think I'm on my own. Don't want to feel like I'm on my own. So that's brilliant. You're in the right place. And I would really, really appreciate it if you can keep using the chat function throughout. I'm actually going to be asking you some questions anyway, but keep using it, because as much as I might share a few things that are quite useful for you, I've learned from both being a speaker on these things, but also a participant, the chat function is really useful because you get to hear what other people are thinking, how they're connecting the dots. And so because you're good at multitasking, do look there as well and contribute and just give your insight to other people as well, because that's really useful for us. So to get us started, I'm actually going to ask you a question that isn't very nice, and we're only going to stay there for a short period of time, so please don't worry. But I'm going to ask you to put in the chat, what does it feel like when you're not motivated? What does it feel like when you've got that slump? What does it feel like, and what's the impact of it? What does it feel like and what's the impact? And I'd love to see what answers you have there. So I'm going to look again over to the chat. Exhausting, depressing, utterly exhausting, utterly depressing. I completely agree with you. Draining, hard work, low energy. And right, David, thank you. It impacts your whole life. It's not like you can be motivated in one place and then somehow magically that makes up for other parts of your life. You've got to be motivated at work, at home, because funnily enough, we're one person and they're integrated. We need to be able to get out of our work what we put into it. We need to get into that place where work is something that energizes us rather than just drains us. So when motivation is low, well, you can just look, you can see the answers that are coming through. Even just reading those makes you feel a bit smaller, makes you feel actually not quite as buoyant as you'd like to. Just thinking about motivation is depressing. So actually, I'm going to ask you just to shake that off for a moment and obviously ask you the opposite question. I would love to hear, I'd like you to actually associate with your time. Remember a time, maybe it was 5 minutes ago, when you're really motivated, where you really felt, yeah, I'm buzzing. What did that feel like? And what impact does that have? So what does high motivation feel like? And what impact does it have? So let's, again, just look at those words. So I love that, Claire. Feeling like your core is on fire. I love that. Feeling really uplifted. Yeah, a wedding will do that for you, particularly your daughters, I should imagine. Uplifting, in control, inspiring. We're all going to have different words, and just read through those as I keep talking. We're all going to have a different sense of how it feels, because motivation is a feeling. Motivation is a feeling. We're going to have a different sense of how it feels, and we'll have a different experience of actually what impact it has. But they are things like being able to do more, have more control, being able to get more done. And oh, Peter, absolutely. Billy Elliott's Electricity. I haven't made that connection before. So I do describe motivation as electricity. And the reason I talk about it that way, and maybe it was from Billy Elliot, maybe I've not been referencing him, is because you can't actually see it. We think we can see it. We think we can see motivation because we see the behaviors, but actually we are seeing the behavior, not the motivation. They are separate, and I shall come back to that. So like electricity, we only know it's there through what it touches. So I know my iPhone, which is currently charging actually, is being charged because the fact that it's got a little display on it saying I'm being charged. I can't see the electricity. And that's true of motivation. It's invisible. And perhaps because it's invisible, we kind of rely on it being there. And we're surprised when life feels like a bit of a struggle. We're surprised when actually something feels really easy. We haven't realized how much is in the fuel tank. So I'm going to encourage you and help you understand what's in the fuel tank as we go through today. So we've looked at when motivation is high and low, and we understand that that's really important. What I'd love to hear is understanding a bit more about actually how this links to something that matters, because does it actually matter just being motivated? Does it matter being inspired? Does it matter? Well, you could argue yes. But let's come back to the world of work and life. And in both those areas, because they're integrated, don't we just want to be successful? In some areas, we talk about productivity and performance, but really it's success. So again, what I'd like to understand from you is, what are the ingredients of that productivity, performance, success, whatever you want to call it, getting to good? I've given you a clue. One of them is motivation. And in my world, there's three. So we've got one, which is motivation. But what are the other two ingredients? Again, please use the chat, because I would love to hear what else you think are the ingredients. I'm having a look over here. So having processes, drive, ambition that are linked to goals, having a common goal. So this is coming up with one of the areas, absolutely. And we've got the other one, so that's brilliant. So you're absolutely there. Keep going with them, because I will pick up as you're putting them in. I'll bring in your thinking. What I think is that success, that performance, that productivity actually comes from a combination of the motivation, which I'll come back to. But often we describe it actually from another place first. We describe it from the place of what? The outcomes, the impact, and the results that we have. So some of you have talked about goals, knowing which direction we're going in. That's what I'm talking about here. So it's the outcome, the impact, the results. And I would encourage you to draw yourself a triangle. And at the top of that triangle, put what? And it's the results, the outcome, and the impact that you want to put there. Because that's really what we're so used to measuring success by. What have you done? What have you delivered? What are you aiming for? What are your objectives? But it is an important ingredient, and we've got to be aligned to that. As somebody said in the chat, we've got to have that alignment of it. We've all got to be going in the same direction. And the second one, which I draw over here on my triangle, which I draw over here, is the how. The how. And the how is the skills, the behavior, the experience, the knowledge, all of those things that combine to enable you to get from your how to your what. How do you do it? There are many ways to get to that outcome, to have that impact, but how do you do it? And I am talking to you now. I know we've got such a lovely mixed bunch, actually. Some of you will be coming along today thinking, this is for me. It's the hour that I wanted for myself. That's brilliant. Others of you will be doing that possibly, and also thinking about the teams that you lead, the teams you have responsibility for, the teams you serve. And I'm just going to give you permission just for now to look at that triangle for you first. We're going to come back to the team, don't worry. And if you look at you, all of us look at ourselves and think about how we contribute to our what. Funny enough, we have a unique contribution, our magic. What makes us us, how we go about that. It's often the skills and the behaviors that we kind of take for granted because other people rely on us for it, count on us for it, but it's just easy for us. But there's also behaviors we know that lurk over there that aren't that great, that actually can disable us, derail us. We may come back to those later. Just try and put the positive ones in for now. Just notice those positive ones. What enables you to get to that good outcome, impact, and results? So you have the what, we have the how. So what's that third question that picks up the motivation? Again, just in the chat for me, what might that third question be? See what you come up with. It enables me to have a quick slurp. Yeah, and most people think it's why. And that's because good old Simon Sinek, of which I have almost a bookshelf full of his work, talks about why. I'm sure a lot of it comes from there. And he talks about why in a sense of purpose. And I'm purpose driven. I really do think why is huge. But if we just go after our why without balancing it with other factors, we could still burn out. And I will explain more on that. What we really need to ask ourselves is, why do we bother? Why bother? That's what I look at. Why bother? Because actually, when you put why bother into it, it gives it a little bit more edge. It gives you a little bit more of that linking into almost that sort of belligerence that we can have. I don't know why I bother. I bother because I care. I bother because it matters. I bother because it drives me. Rather than just thinking about our purpose, because whilst many of you, if not all of you, might be driven by purpose, I can guarantee you it's not the only motivator you have. It won't be. And if it feels like it is, as I say, it shouldn't be, because it can lead to that burnout. So we have this triangle, and it's worth just asking yourself actually for a moment how that links to success and productivity, performance, those questions that I was asking earlier. And a really simple way of doing it is actually to go and hop over to the how and give yourself a mark out of 10 for how skilled you are in the job that you do. How much you are able to bring to bear that brilliant magical contribution that you have from a skills, behavior, knowledge, and experience perspective. Give yourself a mark out of 10. You might be brave and put it in here. You don't have to, but it's there in your mind. You've got that score out of 10. And then once you've got that mark and you know what that mark might be, hop over to the why bother and look at actually how motivated are you today? How motivated are you today? Okay. And this is the only bit of maths you need to do. Multiply the two together and you'll get some score at the end of that. Once you've done that, just put that to one side for a moment. And then separately, think about actually when you look at your performance, your success at the moment, right now, how successful are you being? As a percentage, how successful are you being? What would you give that score? And again, have that figure in your mind. I've written it down. So now you've got a couple of different scores in mind. That first one that I asked you to calculate is a really rough and ready way of being able to see actually with your available energy, your motivation, and your available skills, when you multiply them together, what is the sustainable level of contribution that you're able to give right now? Because you're being motivated at that level. So you've got the energy, you've got the skill, put them together, what's that level? And then you need to look at that other percentage that you had, how well you're performing, and just notice which one's higher. For some of you, your actual performance score, the one where you just thought, how well am I doing right now, might be higher than the one you calculated. So you might be delivering 80%. Let's use some simple numbers. You're delivering at 80%. But when you look at your calculation, yeah, you might be skilled at 8 out of 10, but you're only motivated, if I'm honest, 5 out of 10 right now. So 40%. You've got a massive gap between where you're, in theory, should be delivering and where you are delivering. What makes up that shortfall? I can tell you, it's you digging deep. It's you pushing through. It's you going into your reserve tanks. It's you turning up a bit grumpy. It's you going into your bad day energies. It's you sacrificing you rather than actually thinking about being selfish in order to be selfless. So if your performance score is higher than that calculated score, then we need to do something to get that motivation level up. If it's the motivation level that indeed is pulling it down. If it's not that, if you're highly motivated, your skills need some work, then obviously that's a different webinar. But this is what we often see, it's that way round. If it's the other way round, actually, where you are motivated and skilled to deliver and you're performing at a lower level, I would suggest that the what piece is off. That you've got all this energy and all these skills, but it's not delivering on something that really has an impact, outcome, result that matters, to get that what piece clarified. Okay, I'm hoping that makes sense. If that makes sense, please put a yes in the chat so I can make sure that you're all still with me and you figure out which way around the scores are going. So if that is making sense, then brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant. I can see those yeses coming through. So that's why it's important, because so often when we're thinking about performance and success, we either tend to go back and presume, well, don't we need to just clarify what the outcome is first? We go to the what, or we go over to the how and think about, let's send somebody on a training program. They might be useful, but if actually what's stopping people from being successful is their motivation, surely that's the best place to start. Surely that's the best place to start. And so that's where we start. We look at motivation first, and we look at that electricity that fuels people, enables people to be the successful person that we want them to be. So in terms of just thinking about how this all sits together and what you can do with this, I mean, I would say one of the first things that you could do if you are thinking about yourself is to start thinking about what motivates you. And that's what we're going to do next. What motivates you, and how can you really harness that so that you can unleash that potential that you have? So I'm going to help you do that in a moment. And if you don't have any of these conversations with people around you, then maybe that's something you want to do too. Start with yourself first, but then just be curious about what motivates your team. Actually ask them. So we've got another question for you. What I'd like to know now is actually, what does motivate you? I'm going to ask you straight on and see what we get in terms of results here. What motivates you? And let's narrow it a bit and say, what motivates you at work? I'd love to see now what motivates you at work. So let's see. I'm going to again look down here. So Jonathan, making a difference. Wow, some of you can type so fast. Wow. Team humor. I love that, Claire. Absolutely. Helping people, being creative, having fun. You can read them. I don't need to read them for you, but there's so many words in there, aren't there? If I ask you directly what motivates you, you are going to come up with a great big long list. So we need to find a way to make that easier for you. One, for yourself, to figure out actually what is it I need to do to increase my level of motivation or maintain it. But if you're working with other people, I don't know about you, but I'd find it really hard to be able to place in my mind what motivates everybody in my team. So we need an easier way to do that. So if we look at those different words that you've used, if we understand that actually we're motivated by different things, there's a few things to consider here. Now, if you look at good old Maslow, most people, when you talk about motivation, have to talk about Maslow. And I do, because he's offered us a gift from last century that we still can use in now. it's extraordinary, really, that we can still use much of the theory. But you'll remember, if you remember Maslow, he had the hierarchy of needs that placed things like food and shelter at the bottom, and then security, and then we go into being able to have a sense of belonging and social recognition, all the way through to being at the top, where you are self-actualization, is what he believed that's where we aim for. Yeah. But I would say, and many people that also use the same thinking as I do, think that that's not the hierarchy. It is our hierarchy that we need to be concerned about. So is it that Maslow was wrong? No. Maslow was talking about a hierarchy of needs. We're talking about probably needs and wants. Okay. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is actually start to draw some distinction between those things that are our needs and our wants. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that there are things that are at the top of our hierarchy up here that really drive us, that as we get a taste of them, we want more and more and more of them. They really are our wants. They're really important to know, because it's those things really, when we get right, keep giving us that sustainable energy. It's what keeps us getting what you probably think of as intrinsic energy, that sense of the work itself gives me that. That's like having a renewable energy source rather than the fossil fuels, because actually they are renewable. You can keep getting more and more of them, but you need to know them. But sometimes those wants can seem quite a long way away, particularly when the things that sit beneath them, our needs, aren't being met. And that's what I found in the last 18 months, 2 years, is that the conversations I'm having with people are less about their wants right now and are more about their needs. Because of what we've all lived through, we're having to really check in on our basic needs. So let's have a look at those needs. I just actually split those into 2 parts. So we've got our wants, our needs, but in our needs, we've got day-to-day needs, but we've got our real basic ones, the ones that just get us functioning, the ones that just get us functioning. And a clue here is, if you've got some bad habits going on, to use Brené Brown's words, if you're numbing yourself in an evening with box sets and chocolate and wine and whatever your numbing choice is, so to say that's bad. But if it comes from a place of a bad habit, if you're doing it because you're trying to avoid something, chances are if you're doing that is because your basic needs aren't being met. It's a really good clue if you're doing those things. So what do I mean by basic needs? And this is a really good place for you to start. Have a think about what things get you functioning. What is it that makes you feel like somebody just put the light on so you can see you've got enough energy to go, to do a bit more? What is it that enables you to just be you, and just show up enough? And that's what I'm talking about, is enough, not firing off, just enough. So for me, I said to Amanda just before the call, actually, I took a walk this morning before all my calls, because it was a gorgeous day with frost and blue sky. And I just love that, because being able to get proper light is really important. Who knew light was important? Maybe I was a plant in a previous life, I don't know. But it's really important to me. So I have to get natural light. Yes, I need food, but what food do I need? Yes, I need water, but what water do I need? They're your basic things. For some, it's movement. For some, it's, I was talking to a lady yesterday, for her, she suddenly realised it's being in nature. Go figure, all she does outside of work is gardening. Why wouldn't that be something that breathes life into her soul? And she thought she didn't need to do that for 40 hours of the week. My suggestion was to notice nature during those 40 hours of the week. So there's something about our basic needs. So just put in the chat for me what you think some of your basic needs might be. So I've mentioned things like light, but yours can be, who knows? What might they be? Oh, Carly, yeah, cuddle from the kids, good old oxytocin. A cuppa, yep. My echinacea, yoga, movement, love, coffee, a laugh. We all know what they are. gym. We all know when we get a bit ratty, when we're not quite us. They're your basic needs. So write your ones down somewhere. Write down what this idea of having basic needs and what yours might be, and just notice them over the next week or so. What can you do to actually have those basic needs met more? What are those little tiny better habits that you can put in place that will actually stop the bad habits? Trying to stop drinking, stop binging actually is quite hard. Do something else. Start taking care of your basic needs. You can see how this links to well-being, can't you? It's really important. So we've got our basic needs, and then we have these other needs. These other needs, what are they? These other needs are, well, they are those things that you need to have met enough that they're important, but you don't know they're important until they're not there. They might sound like the basic needs, but they're more than that. So if we look at it in a work context, because it's easier to look at it from there, actually, when you ask a lot of people what drives them, what motivates them, they actually talk about often pay, talk about money. And for some people, absolutely, money does motivate. It is one of those ones at the top. It's for their one, they just love money. They love the smell of it. They love what it gives them. They love it. They want more and more of it. But to a lot of people, and I'm one of these, clients don't hear this, money actually isn't what drives me. However, if I feel like I'm not got enough of it, or I feel that it's unfair what I'm getting in return for my worth, then it starts to bug me. It's like a stone in your shoe. It's just uncomfortable. It's a distraction. And that distraction gets more and more and more as you go on. So it doesn't matter whether you're in what should be the best job ever, because your wants are being met, if the middling needs aren't being met, it is like that annoying stone in your shoe. So just notice what is something in your work that might not be being met enough, or what is it that is being met enough, but actually having more of it's all a bit of a waste of time, bluntly, because having more of it's a bit pointless. You'd rather that money got spent on something else, or that time got spent on something else. That's what I'm inviting you to do in this bit. So again, if you would like to, if you can think what those things might be, those middling needs, put them in the chat. I'd love to hear what's enough, or what, if it's not quite enough, causes that distraction. It's not what drives you. What are those things? Put in the chat what might be those middling needs, so you can get enough of them. So yeah, respect, recognition, being noticed, appreciation. It's an interesting one, that one. I could go off. You could see me, my eyes went, I could go off on that conversation, because there's so much about recognition. How much is it public versus private? All those sorts of things. Really interesting. So there's something about noticing what those middling needs are. So do look into that. Do think, because funnily enough, when somebody isn't having those needs met, they act out possibly, and people can presume that's what really drives them. And then they fail to understand the person. We need to understand that that's just a need that needs to be met. The stone needs to be taken out of the shoe. It's not that you need to do this forever. Okay. And then we have the wants at the top. And actually I was unfair earlier because I asked you what motivates you. And I think it's really, really, really difficult to answer that question, because we don't get asked it enough. And when we do, we think this is our opportunity to ask for a pay rise, or to get one of those unmet needs met. That's what's so rare, that we go to that place. So my recommendation would be to do motivational maps. I will come back to that. It's not my product, so it's just a general out there. Go do motivational maps. I know Uspire use that. We use it. It's a brilliant tool. Motivational maps, a bit like a psychometric, identifies your motivators, does all the hard work, just easy. But if you don't want to use that, or you for whatever reason you choose not to, actually some questions that you can ask in terms of those for you to really hear, are to ask yourself and or your team, what is it that you really love about work? And listen, What else? What else? The what else always gives the answer. So what is it you really love about work? What else? What else? And then actually what we want to know is, what does that give you? Because it's in asking the what does it give you that you actually hear what the motivation is, rather than the activity that enables that motivation to come through. So I might love delivering workshops, doing what I'm doing here. I love doing speaking engagements. I love doing training, love all of those things. But my reason, what does it give me? For me, it's learning, it's making a difference. It's freedom, actually, as well. Go where I like, do what I want to talk about what I like within reason. So it meets my top motivators, my wants. For somebody else who could be able to do what I do, their reason for doing it, so they could say, I love doing speaking engagements. I love being able to do workshops, same as what I said. But their reasons might be, I just love connecting. You know, it's an opportunity for me to connect through with people I haven't seen for a long time. That's a different motivator. Or their motive might be, I just love being on stage. I love being in the limelight. I love having that focus on me. That's not my motivator. But you need to understand what drives me to be able to find other opportunities to satisfy the motivator. So for me, learning, making a difference, freedom, rather than thinking, just give a lot more speaking engagements. Or worse, presume it's about being in the limelight and get me out in the limelight more. I might not like that bit. So the question or questions were, what is it you really love about your job? What is it you really look forward to? What else? What else? And what does that give you? Okay. You can reverse it afterwards if you choose and ask, what is it you just drains you? What is it you don't like about your role? And what else? And what is it about that you don't like? And in hearing that, you will hear certainly things that are very much down the lower down their motivation list. And it often, when people get the chance to properly talk about that, they start giving you a clue as to what they really would prefer instead. So it gives you a clue as those top motivators as well. So I definitely would ask you to have those conversations, firstly with yourself, maybe get a buddy and have that conversation so that you can explore that for you, or do a motivation map to get that understanding, and have that conversation with your team. What would it be like if you had a conversation at this time of year with a member of your team that wasn't, what are your objectives and what's your learning plan for the year, but it was more from a place of, should we just talk about actually what you're looking forward to? What is it that really excites you? Actually, can I ask you some questions about what it is that you've loved about your job? Blah, blah, blah. You get where I'm coming from. Because if you start from that place, what you're able to do then is start building out the triangle. Because if you get those answers, you're going to hear what motivates them, why they bother. From that place, you can ask them, well, you know what the organisation's trying to do this year, what the organisation is trying to do this year. What of that is important to you? What is it that you're connecting with, you're engaged with, you're excited about? And funnily enough, they will start to come up with outcomes, impact, results. Their what they want to focus on. It's objectives by another name, but actually it's more meaningful because they are connecting it through their energy, their why bother. And you can also ask the question from that why bother place. So what are the skills, the behaviors, the how they're going to get you to that place? And they might come up with actually some skills and behaviors that they know, oh, do I really have to do that? But they'll understand why they're doing it. They'll understand why it's so important to build better relationships, to be able to follow processes. You know, we all got processes. I mean, goodness, you know, working in the commercial space, you know, thinking about those customers, we've got to have processes to get consistency. But do I want to? Well, if I understand what drives me, suddenly delivering and developing those skills get the outcomes that I want. Does this make sense? That's what I want to hear from you. Is this making sense? Are you being able to connect those dots for yourself? Please say yes. And then I feel like I am hopefully making a difference, but my freedom to go around and talk about things and to demonstrate my hopefully some knowledge is useful for you. So thank you. Brilliant, good stuff. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing I should say really is connecting their motivation, your motivation, to the what and the how. And I would really encourage you, when you're thinking about that triangle, I said this earlier, this is your triangle, your success triangle, your performance triangle, whatever you want to call it. Think of it for you first. And then draw another one just outside of it. That's the team. And think about how your why bother connects to the team's why bother. How your what connects to the team's what. How your how connects to the team. Not the same, needs to complement. And then you know what I'm going to say? You draw one outside of that, which is the directorate or the organisation, whatever, the next layer out. How does the team connect to the why bother, the what and the how? That alignment is so key, and I will come back to that. But it's important to say it right now, because so often we are used to, aren't we, to start with probably the organisation, particularly when we're thinking about objectives. It's this idea of cascade. What does the organisation want us to deliver? Do we have the skills to get there? And maybe tip into the motivation. I'm not sure we often see that, or certainly as much as we need to. And even at team level, I don't think we do that enough. So yeah, individual, team, organisation, and then if you're really driven by purpose, the world, because actually you can see how, and we've seen this with organisations, haven't we, most particularly over the last couple of years, how that purpose-driven organisation that's been around for a long time is actually those that connect into the wider piece are actually having greater impact. And actually that's where the impact on customers is so great, where you see that internal understanding of what drives us, which we sometimes express as values and brand and what have you, internally aligns with the same externally. When you're doing this work that I'm talking to you about now, where you've got individuals truly understanding how they contribute into their team, into the organisation, funnily enough, they show up really well to the rest of the world and the customers, and are impacting supply chains and what have you. That's what's exciting for me, and that's where I could get really excited from that motivation that I have at making a difference. Because as much as I love being able to help individuals and teams, what I do mostly, actually it's the ripple effect that we can all have on that wider picture that actually makes it easier for ourselves. So yeah, really important to I'm looking at the chat here, really important to be able to think about those different areas and connect the dots, and don't sort of think that you come last after all of this. Actually, you start with you, and then go and talk to your team, the individuals within your team, to make sure that you understand just how, in aligning and harnessing, that's what I'm getting to, in harnessing that motivation, just what difference that can all make. Really, really important. So we have so far an action potentially on you to define the difference between your basic needs, your needs and your wants. We then have a potential other action to look at how you can have those conversations with other and start joining the dots between them, because I think that's really important. So if this is starting to feel, oh God, I've got more things I've got to do with my team, I'm already busy, please don't feel that. My absolute belief is that motivation is something that is our responsibility, individual. And therefore, all I'm asking you to do is probably to encourage, enable, empower, I don't know what word I want to use there, encourage the people around you to really take ownership of their motivation. Share with them some of what we're talking about today. Because actually, when they start owning their own motivation, when they take a daily practice of deliberately thinking, actually, how does this meet my basic needs? How does this meet my motivators? They're taking responsibility for it. They can do something about it, which enables them to fully show up. When we're really driven, we're really taking care of our needs as well. We've got both those parts of the equation together, our needs and our wants both being met well. We can fully show up. We can be the people that we need and want to be. to make the successes we need and want. And we can continue to grow because we've got the energy to grow. And when we're feeling good, funnily enough, it's contagious. We enable others around us to grow. So that idea, those words I've used there, are actually my definition of leadership. And it's about being able to encourage others to do this, to take that daily practice, to fully show up, take responsibility, those words. And you'll find all of that in the book that Amanda said to mention earlier. I will come back to it, but Create Motivation is all in here. It's about unlocking your own leadership and those in your team. So let's move on and think about actually, if we're going to harness motivation in those ways and maybe change the way you have reviews with your team to bring in that why bother, could we push this one step further? Could we create motivation? I certainly hope so. There's a whole book about it. I absolutely believe you can create motivation, but I have to admit it's a bit of a cheat, because whilst I do believe you can create it, there's a particular process in which you create it. And I've used an acronym, CREATE, to get you there. So I'll explain that as we go through. I think it's very important to recognize that this isn't about you being a cheerleader necessarily, and you being all inspirational and, you know, doing the whole flag waving for people. That is lending your motivation to other people and you'll get exhausted. That's not what I'm talking about. If that comes naturally to you, great, but I'm not asking you to actually do that. What I'm asking you to do is enable people to create their own motivation, and you do that first by looking at yourself. So what do I mean by create motivation? As I say, it's an acronym, so let's break that down, and I will hopefully get a chance to talk about an actual example of this as at the end of this. So create motivation, current reality, that's the first piece. So current reality. I think, don't know about you, it's really interesting how this time of year everybody's sort of talking about New Year's resolutions and where you're going and your goals, and it's all about future. It's all over there somewhere. I find it quite exhausting. I actually think that this is a brilliant time to take stock, and that's where I think we always should start with. Whenever we feel there's something more, there's something else, there's something off, don't start planning the future. Look here at your current reality. So what do I mean by that? Let me just say, I love the mountains. So I use a mountain analogy for this. I so wish I could go back to the mountains now. It will happen soon. Funnily enough, the triangle is a bit like a mountain. So that's why I use that metaphor. So for me, a mountain is a happy place. It is where I feel most in my most expanded self. And in order for me to check in on my current reality, I need to know my motivations, my how, and my what. So my why bother, my how, and my what. There's no point me looking back at how I used to be motivated. There's no point looking back at the skills I used to have or what I used to deliver, because I'm me now. Yes, they will have got you here, but actually what I would like you to do is to acknowledge that journey, but hone in on now. So what are the outcomes, impact, results that you're getting today or in the recent past? What has good looked like to you? What are the skills, the behaviors, the experience, the knowledge that, if you like, are in the rucksack that have got you to this place? We all know them. We put them in over the years, all of those things. What's in there now? Which are the useful ones that are in there now? Not what they used to be. What are they now? And then look to the motivations. Check in, like we've been talking about. What are your motivations right now? Because from that place, I absolutely not only believe, used to be I believe, I now know, because I've been using this model for a long time, I know that when you check in on your current reality, you absolutely are able to stand strong in who you are. You can own what enables your success. You'll also know what some of the derailers are, and you know you can come back to those. That's fine. Don't ignore them. Be aware of them. But really own that which is you. Acknowledge the past versions of you, but you're here, version, let's say 2022. Okay, because from that place, you can then start planning. It's a bit like you need to clear the weeds around you. If you're going to start growing, if you're going to start expanding, you can't just throw some seeds in anywhere and just hope it'll grow. You need to tend the soil. You need to be able to create some space for that to grow, for you to grow. And that's what we need to do. We need to be able to sort of deliberately choose where that growth is going to occur and look at what's going on in the environment to make that happen. Because from that place of current reality, and go back to Middle Mountains analogy, from this place on this mountain, funnily enough, I can see different mountains to the ones that I would have seen from that old version of myself. Does that make sense? So in looking, and it's the E of create, first E, is envision. If I envision, actually that's where I want to go, that's the mountain that I want to go to, then that gives me a space between where I am now and where I want to go to. And that in itself is motivational. Lots of studies to talk about how having that space is so important. We need the space to grow into, the space to learn, actually the space to unlearn before we learn. So that's what we're doing. We're expanding that space, but by looking at the difference between our current reality and our envisioned future. And that means that we can start looking at what good looks like on that mountain. What outcomes, impact, results will I deliver on that mountain? What are the skills, the experience, knowledge, and behaviors that will help me get to the top of that mountain? And what are the motivators? Now, I just wanted to say something quickly here. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were thinking, when I was talking about mountains, they thought that it means that it's something hard, and it's going to be a really hard climb to go up this mountain. You've got to know something. I use a chairlift. My way of getting up to the top of those mountains is the easy way. I choose my route. Even when I walk in the mountains, I choose the easy route. This is not about a slog, unless that drives you. Fill your boots if that's what drives you. I'm all about ease. What would be easy? What uses my motivations? What uses my skills to get to that outcome? So that's what I would encourage you to do, is get that current reality and then that envisioned future, and make sure that you're equipped for the journey, that you're not sort of thinking, oh, I need to carry this heavy rucksack of all of those skills I've always used. Actually clear a bit out. Some of those things you've learned in the past, you'd no longer need, actually. So embedded, you don't need to carry the owner's manual around on it. It's heavy. So then we come to an A, don't we, and create an A. What might that be? Well, I've mentioned it before, actually. It's the alignment. So here, if you're doing all this work to think, how I bother on my current reality and future, it needs to be aligned. And that's where I was saying, align it to the team, the organization, the world, the universe, whatever floats your boat. That alignment is really key, because actually we need to hear what's important around the team. We need to hear what the opportunities are there as well. So that's what I mean by the alignment. And you might find that you tweak slightly some of the way that you're planning to go on that journey, which is great. That if you are, it means you're listening and you're aware of the opportunities. Then we come to a T. What might that T be? That T is test out. From this place, when you do this work, I promise you, when you do this work, you're going to feel motivated, because you have a really clear understanding and you're standing strong in who you are and where you're going. And you know it's aligned and there's an opportunity for you to do it. And the temptation is to start stomping out and getting on with it. I want you to just stay for a moment to look at that journey and to test out what might be some of the barriers along the way. What might be some of the possibilities that if you're single-mindedly just going to go on that track, you miss out on. So test out is about, before you take a step, before you go towards that envisioned future, you just check out, what are those habits you get into that might not be useful What do you need to make sure you've got some awareness of around you, some help perhaps to stop you falling into old habits that aren't helpful? What might be some of the barriers you might have to overcome? Because actually, if you're doing that planning now in your resourceful self, and many of you use See Me and Insights, we talk about behaviors and good day energy, you'll be in a good day place, really resourceful. From this resourceful place, you'll be able to figure out how you're going to overcome those. You're less likely to be able to figure out how to overcome them when you're stuck halfway up that mountain. I'd much rather know I've packed the snow chains when I leave here, rather than figure out the bottom of the big climb up in the Alps. I need to have packed it with me. I need to know that first. I need to check the weather forecast for the next few days. So that's test out. Go into it with your eyes open. And then the E. The final E of create, what might that be about? Well, for me, that's engage. None of us can do this alone. We need other people alongside us. We need to be alongside other people. To be the best that we can be, funnily enough, is with others. So it's about engaging. That engaging might be about getting a buddy, a mentor, some help to keep you on track, to give you the accountability. But it's certainly also going to be that if you're coming from this place of being excited about this trek that you're going on, this exciting adventure, this wonderful climb up on the chairlift, actually it might be a good idea that you're telling others that you're going in that direction, because you might want them to come with you. And if you suddenly just march off, I think, where have you gone now? Where? You need people to also know, to also come on that track, not to come on your journey necessarily, but for them to do the work, for them to be able to check in on their individual, how I got there, and align it with yours. And I don't mean align as in complete rigid alignment. I mean congruent, really, but a C wouldn't work in that word. So we're looking for it to be flexible enough, but aligned enough to both be on the same journey, or to all be on the same journey. Because you're going to need people to have your back, and others will need to know that you've got their back. Who are you going to take on that journey? That's really what I'm asking here. So that's what I would absolutely encourage you to do, is to think about that create. So I'd love to hear just in the chat, is this making sense? First of all, is that create model something that you feel that you could do? Just give me a sort of a sense in there, because I want to, before I come to some final pieces, and we will have hopefully some time for some questions. I'd just love to see that. So I'm getting lots of yeses, which is great. But yeah, I do want to make sure that this is landing for you. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So let's just recap where we are. Let's just bring this back to some actionable points for you. We know that motivation is contagious, positive and negative. If you are a leader, and I think secretly everybody is, because we're a leader of ourselves, our families, our work teams, our communities, whatever it might be, if you have influence on anybody, how you are will impact on them. If you've got low motivation, you will, at some point, tip into bad day behavior. And that's because we've got a difference between the level at which we get energy from our work versus that which it costs us. So if you're deplete in any way, then I would encourage you to really think about, actually, what is it that work gives me? What is it that I just love? What else? What else? And what is it about that I could have more of in my role? How could I arrange things differently to have more of that motivation? Because as we have more of those, we've got more energy. It's like we've topped up our fuel tank. But I'd also ask you to look at where the energy might be leaking out, where there's some gaping holes, where our needs aren't being met, or where we have tasks that just don't suit us, that maybe we need to figure out how differently we do. Now, Sometimes it's about giving those jobs to other people. That sometimes is possible, and I definitely would advocate it. But sometimes it's actually about recognizing there are always jobs that we've got to do that we don't enjoy. But look at actually how in doing them it might benefit you. I hate accounts. I really hate doing numbers. But for me, by actually spending some time on those, by having some structure around how I check in on my accounts, that gives me freedom. And you remember, freedom is one of my top motivators. So it's not because I have to follow the process. That's one of my lowest ones. It's something I'm not motivated by. It's because it will give me freedom. So check in on that as well. So understand your motivators, find ways to meet them, understand what might drain you, find ways to make this work for you so that you are being energized by work, not depleted by it. Then think about how that connects, the why bother connects to your how and your what for you, your triangle. How you can bring your skills to bear, how you can deliver on things that really matter to you, and then start building that out to the team, the organization, and more broadly. Maybe bring that into review conversations with your teams. Maybe think about actually how you can have more conversations about motivation at those levels of individual and team. And then when you've got that real desire to think, yeah, it's time for me to do something a bit different. So people keep talking about the Great Resignation at the moment, and I was looking earlier at stats between 25 and 69% of people looking at changing their role. Deloitte talked about it at the end of last year as the Great Reimagination. I see it as the Great Reset, actually. I think there's something about helping people just settle into what they want this year to be about, to take some responsibility for how they're going to get through this year positively, despite the stuff that keeps being thrown at us, and how you're going to, perhaps for yourself, think about how your motivations deliver outcomes that matter to you, using skills and building skills that matter to you, and how you can have that conversation more in the round with your teams to achieve that. And that's the sort of conversations I have with people. Just a quick one just before we finish. I was just catching up with somebody yesterday, and I knew this conversation obviously with you was happening today, so I was mindful of it and speaking to them and where they've been. They've done stuff around this before. They're quite conversant with motivation, but funnily enough, they'd got themselves into a place where, although their outcomes, impact, results on the surface looked good, they were delivering, the business were relying on them, they were, by all intents and purposes, you should give them an 8 or a 9 out of 10 on that. And their skill sets, brilliant. They've got some amazing skills. The organization, has given them such an opportunity to hone their skills. And they'd say, yeah, they're okay. When it comes to motivation, when we dug a bit deeper, we could see actually the true impact on them was burnout. The true impact was lack of trust leading to dysfunctional team working, impact on how they delivered the product, which was having an impact on the sales team. It was impacting on their skills. They were doubting themselves on their skills. Their behavior was true bad day under the parapet. If they were really honest with themselves, they were not good. And the motivation, actually, when we dug into it, wasn't that great. What we did was able to realign that, was able to actually understand over the course of a couple of conversations, culminating in yesterday's sort of summary, really, of them standing in their current reality and how much they'd been holding on for dear life to that old version of themselves when they were really a manager, not the director that they now are, and that they had thought they need to deliver all the results. It's up to them rather than the team that they'd employed. And the behaviours that they were displaying were indeed those ones which might suit them, but certainly didn't suit the team and was not enabling growth, and certainly wouldn't enable them to step into their director position. And when we looked at their motivation, we understood why, because they were so driven by expert, which is about making a difference, which is about learning and demonstrating your learning, and being able to show your stuff, that the idea of delegating to other people would mean somehow they wouldn't do it as well. How do you get somebody else to do what you've always been rewarded for? And they had high director. They thought that it was all down to them. So what we were able to do, and it's a longer story than we have time for, but what we were able to do is help them see how, by harnessing their motivation, by really owning their current reality, that actually they now are in a brilliant place to look at how they can step into their leadership, delegate incredibly well to their team, and have their motivations met so that they can fill the space that organisation needs them to do, which is to actually build that organisation into the next stage, which is highly commercial. They've just been bought by another organisation, and it's a very different kettle of fish that they're being asked to deliver. It's really exciting, and she now feels ready. So I hope you feel ready. I hope you've got some benefit from our time this afternoon. I'm going to hand back to Amanda and ask if there's any questions that have come through, well, we'll see where we get to in terms of just being able to really land this for you. But thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate. I'm going to ask you one question. And then as you are answering that question, if you have any questions or anything that comes up for you with Kate, then please do ask questions. The question is, what one thing do you think you can do right now to re-energize yourself? Assuming that you're not 10 out of 10. I don't know any leader who is this January, in fairness.
Yeah. So you asking me or what I would do?
No, I'm asking everybody in the chat. What one thing, everybody, do you think you can do to re-energize yourself before we talk about team, yourself? Yeah, absolutely. I can see, take stock, eat better.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Get outside is mine. Get off the chair and outside.
Yeah, move a bit.
Be kind, look deeper, yeah. Walk in the sunshine, exercise, physical. We are stuck in our chairs at the moment, aren't we?
And one thing I just want to say, actually,
digital holiday. Thank you, Claire, definitely.
Sorry. Yeah, that's right. No, I love that. That individual team organisation piece. Somebody said, look deeper. I've lost the name now. Actually, I would really encourage you to think of individual is kind of how we show up at work and what have you. Put another triangle inside. Who are you really?
Yeah, interesting.
Who are you really? How do you really want to show up? What really drives you? That integrated self. Who's that? Because sometimes people feel like they need to put a bit of a front on. And that's what we sometimes deal with. I certainly sometimes deal with at work. And after a couple of sessions, we get down to the real nitty gritty. Yeah. That's the look deeper. So I'd encourage you to do that. It's so important.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Martin Daniels, your 10-year-old has just given you a massive hug, which is hugely motivating. I wish that they could give us all one. Let's have them give us all one. Okay. Fantastic. Listen, I've got a couple more things to say. Have we got, if you hands up, anybody got any questions, comments, thoughts for Kate?
Amanda, it's Mark here. I just wanted to remind everyone what Kate was saying around use this with your teams. It's a questioning process. Simple questions around what makes you get up in the morning and why bother is massively insightful, particularly because most people are motivated differently to us. So we've got to try and understand it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Yeah. So David at Edwards Life Sciences is asking, Kate, can you recommend a good motivational map to be able to redo this after the session, possibly with some structure, more structure?
Yeah. So, well, Motivational Maps is a product. It is a fabulous tool. So yeah, I think, Amanda, you're going to explain how people can get access to that. So,
Yeah.
It's really important to it's such a quick way to understand what drives you. Actually, whilst I remember, because I've talked a lot today about create, and because I probably talk quite quickly, there are lots of free resources available to you, which please go and have a look at them. So create-motivation.co.uk. Go and have a look at those. They're freely available to you, and they will certainly dig into some of what I've talked about today, and it will talk about things like basic needs and what have you. So that will help you discover some of what we've been talking about. But Motivational Maps is a product that I'd highly recommend. We use them all the time, have done we've been since the beginning, 16 years.
Just my map, I have mine up all the time, and it's a bar chart like this that gives me all my, you can't quite see that, you can kind of see my bar chart, one of the things that we're going to offer you at the end of today is, if you did want to do an actual map, David, and get some coaching with it, we're offering you that a special offer, which I'll talk about in a moment. Mark already said this. Is there any other questions? No, thank you, Kate. The question Mark mentioned, asking questions, and for me, it's absolutely key. What really resonated most from what you've told us, Kate, and what you've talked about, is that motivation is like electricity, and you only know how strong it is when it touches somebody else, or it might touch you as well, but if it touches you, so who are you touching? And go and ask them that question about what do you love about working here? Or even, if you're even braver and more courageous, what do you love about working with me? That's an even more courageous question, which is fantastic. Kate, as ever, thank you so much for coming and as our partner, coming and spending some time with us. It's been absolutely wonderful and really, really, really resonant right now in January, for me anyway. Whether, I will admit that January motivation is something that I usually have to work on, and this January, whoa, tell you. So thank you, virtual round of applause for you there. Thank you very, very, very much indeed. Very much. A couple of things, and I think, Chris, you're going to share these in the chat for me. A couple of things to remind you about. The first is that our next Discovery Day is on the 10th of February, and it is Discover the Power of Virtual Sales. And that is with our very own Mark Francis, who is indeed doing exactly this as I am now. Discover the Power of Virtual Sales. It's something that we ran last year and the year before, actually, and it's been one of our most useful topics for sales teams, sales leaders and their teams. So book on. I think the link is going to come up on the chat any second now. And then finally, Uspire Live. We some of you will know that we run in the UK. We usually run 2 live conference events, and our next one, Leading in Volatile Environments, our next paradigm shifter, is going to be all things willing on the 7th of April in central London. And again, Chris is going to put the link up there for you as a leader. If you haven't experienced that, then you are very, very welcome to join us. And finally, please do get in touch. You will receive some emails afterwards reminding you about this. If you want to know about more about our commercial leadership, or indeed just talk about something, it might be a motivation, talk about something that you'd like to chat about in confidence, we're offering all of you a complimentary coaching session to see whether we can help, actually. And our offer is £149 for a personalised motivational map and coaching session, which usually is £395. So again, that will be offered to you in an email. And if you would like to email me or Mark or anybody, any of the directors, if you need to, I'll pop my email address down after this as well. And let me just lose this slide. There we go. All that remains is for me to say to you, thank you again, Kate, and go and rev up that electricity.